It was the morning of my 68th Thanksgiving, and something felt off before I even opened my eyes. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of the furnace clicking on, the way it always does in late November when the temperature drops below zero overnight. 51 years in the same house in Barrie, Ontario. I know every sound this place makes. The third stair creaks. The kitchen tap takes 4 seconds to run hot. The back door sticks in the cold unless you lift the handle slightly before you push. My wife Elaine, God rest her, used to say the house was like a living thing, that it breathed. I thought she was being poetic. After she passed, I understood what she meant. That Thanksgiving morning, the house felt wrong. Not broken, wrong. Quiet, wrong. Like something had already been decided without me. I got up, put on my housecoat, and shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee. My daughter had called the night before to confirm she and her husband would be here by noon with the grandchildren. She sounded warm on the phone. Excited even. "Don't cook anything, Dad. We're bringing everything." I remember thinking how lucky I was. A lot of men my age eat Thanksgiving dinner alone. I should tell you about my daughter. She is 41 years old and she has her mother's eyes. She was a quiet child, the kind who thought before she spoke, who saved her allowance, who cried at the end of movies but tried to hide it. I loved her completely, and without condition, the way you love something you made from nothing. Her husband is a different story. He came into her life about 12 years ago. He sells commercial real estate in the Simcoe County area, and he is the kind of man who laughs a little too loud at his own jokes and shakes your hand with both of his. I tried with him, I genuinely tried. But there was always something transactional about the way he looked at me, like he was calculating, like I was a property he hadn't yet found a use for. My daughter loves him. That's what mattered to me. They pulled into the driveway at 5 past noon. I watched from the living room window. My daughter climbed out first, and she was already smiling, waving up at me through the glass. Behind her, my son-in-law was still sitting in the driver's seat. His window was down, and he was on his phone. Then I saw him nod once, sharply, the kind of nod that means a decision has been made, and he stepped out. My grandchildren came tumbling up the front steps, the older one carrying a casserole dish with both hands, the younger one wearing his hockey helmet for no apparent reason. That made me laugh. That was the last uncomplicated moment of the day. We sat down to eat around 2 o'clock. My daughter had brought a full spread roast turkey, stuffing, sweet potato, the whole thing. My son-in-law uncorked a bottle of Ontario Red and poured generously for everyone except himself. I noticed that. He barely touched his glass. Dinner conversation was easy at first. The kids talked about school. My daughter asked about my neighbor's new dog, which had been barking all week. My son-in-law was quieter than usual, which I mistook for him being tired. Then, somewhere between the turkey and the pie, he excused himself to take a call outside. My daughter watched him go, and there was a look on her face I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, the look she got when she knew something she didn't want to say. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she said, and refilled my wine. He came back 15 minutes later. He sat down, reached across the table to squeeze my daughter's hand once, and then smiled at me, that wide, easy smile he uses when he wants something. "How are you feeling these days, Dad?" he asked. He always calls me Dad. I never asked him to. "Fine," I said, "better than I deserve." He laughed. "You know, with winter coming, I've been thinking, big house for one person. These roads up here get brutal." "I grew up on these roads," I said. Right, he nodded. I just mean if you ever needed help with anything, managing the property, the accounts, whatever. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her plate. I manage fine, I said. He let it go, or appeared to. Later, while my daughter was in the kitchen with the kids cutting pie, he came to stand beside me in the hallway. He lowered his voice. "There's something we should talk about," he said. "About your estate plan. Your daughter is worried, not about the money, just about making sure things are protected. I know a lawyer, good guy, specializes in this kind of thing. We just need you to sign a general power of attorney, something simple, so she can help if something ever happens." I looked at him for a long moment. "I already have a power of attorney," I said. He blinked. "Oh, who did you—" "My old lawyer," I said, "years ago." He smiled again, but it was tighter this time. "Of course. Well, just know the offer stands." That night, after they left, I sat in my armchair with the television off, and I thought about that conversation. I thought about the look on my daughter's face at dinner. I thought about the phone call he'd taken outside, the way he'd nodded when he got back in the car that morning. And then I thought about what my accountant had told me 6 months earlier. His name is Weston. He's been handling my books for 20 years, since before Elaine died, since before I sold the business. He is a careful man, slow to worry, but thorough when he does. He had called me in the spring about something irregular. 2 online inquiries had been made to the land registry office about my property, both under my son-in-law's brokerage name. I had not said anything to my daughter about this. I wasn't sure what it meant. I told myself maybe it was routine, maybe there was a professional explanation. After Thanksgiving, I wasn't so sure anymore. I called Weston the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what had happened at dinner, the conversation in the hallway, the power of attorney request, the lawyer he'd mentioned. Weston was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I was hoping this wasn't where it was going." He explained it to me slowly, the way he always does when he thinks I might push back. He said that a general power of attorney, once signed, gives the named person broad authority to act on your behalf. Sell property, manage accounts, make financial decisions. In Ontario, the document is valid immediately unless restricted, and it can be misused, quietly, gradually, before the grantor even realizes what's happening. He also told me that under the Substitute Decisions Act, a POA can be revoked at any time as long as the grantor has capacity, the key word being capacity. If someone were to later argue that you were confused, forgetful, not fully yourself, well, revocation gets complicated. "You need to see your lawyer," he said. "Not theirs. Yours." I called my lawyer that same afternoon. His name is Callum, and he works out of a small office on Dunlop Street, and I have trusted him since he helped me write my will after Elaine's diagnosis. He is plain-spoken, and he does not waste words. When I told him everything, he said only, "Come in tomorrow morning." I went. We sat across from each other at his desk with the November sleet coming against his window, and he walked me through everything. My existing enduring power of attorney, already properly registered with a trusted alternate, my will, my registered accounts, my property deed. He went through each one and explained in precise terms what could be attacked and what couldn't. Then he said something that stayed with me. The mistake most people make is waiting until they feel threatened. By then, the other side already has a head start. I thought about how long my son-in-law had been making quiet inquiries, how long my daughter had known something I didn't, how long that plan had been sitting in the background of family dinners, holiday visits, casual questions about how I was feeling. I was angry, but I was also, underneath the anger, deeply sad. Because I didn't think my daughter was the one who started this. I thought about the way she hadn't met my eyes at dinner, the way she'd refilled my wine, the way she'd stayed in the kitchen with the grandchildren when her husband cornered me in the hallway. I think she was being managed too, but she was still allowing it, and that I couldn't explain that away. Callum and I put 3 things in motion over the following weeks. First, I added a formal restriction clause to my POA, specifying that it could only be activated by a letter from my physician confirming diminished capacity and naming a second trustee to co-sign any action. Second, I restructured 2 of my registered accounts to add a direct beneficiary designation, which means they transfer outside of my estate entirely and are not subject to any POA at all. Third, I placed my property into a bare trust arrangement on Callum's advice, which adds a procedural layer to any transfer and requires independent legal sign-off. None of this was expensive. None of it took more than 2 weeks. My son-in-law didn't know any of it had happened. He called me in the first week of December, friendly, warm, just checking in. He mentioned the lawyer again, just casually, just in case I'd had a chance to think about it. He said the offer still stood. I told him I appreciated it and that I'd been doing some thinking of my own. He paused. Oh yeah, what kind of thinking? About Elaine, I said, about how she always said you should have the important conversations before you need to, not after. Another pause, shorter. She was a smart woman. The smartest, I said. Enjoyed the rest of your evening. I hung up and I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. I wasn't smug about it, not yet. What I felt was more like grief. Grief for the version of my family I thought I had. Grief that I was spending my late 60s doing this instead of something else. Grief that my daughter, who has her mother's eyes, had sat at my table on Thanksgiving and let her husband do what he did. The call I was not expecting came on a Saturday in January. It was my daughter. She was crying before she'd finished saying hello. She told me that her husband had told her something, that he'd confessed. That wasn't the word she used, but that's what it was. He'd told her about the land registry inquiries, about the lawyer he'd contacted, the POA he'd been trying to obtain, the conversations he'd had with a property developer in Barrie who was interested in my lot, the lot my house sits on, the house I've lived in for 51 years. He'd framed it apparently as protecting the family, long-term planning, making sure things were in order before something happened to me. He had used that phrase, before something happens to me, as if my death were a business event to be optimized around. She said she didn't know how much she'd understood of it in real time. She said she'd told herself it was just practical, that she'd let herself believe that because it was easier than the alternative. Dad, she said, I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything for a moment. I listened to her crying, and I thought about her as a child, the way she used to fall asleep in the car on the way home from her grandmother's, and I'd have to carry her inside. I know, I said. I should have said something. At Thanksgiving, I could see what he was doing, and I didn't. No, I said, you didn't. There was a long pause. The furnace clicked on. Are you okay? She asked. The house, your accounts, did he? Everything is fine, I said. I took care of it. She exhaled, a long, shaky breath. I told her, then, carefully, not triumphantly, what I had done. Callum's name, Weston's name, the trust arrangement, the restricted POA, the registered accounts. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. You already knew, she finally said. "I had a feeling," I said, "after Thanksgiving." "Why didn't you tell me?" That was the harder question. I thought about it honestly before I answered. "Because I needed to take care of the house first," I said, "and because I wasn't sure what you knew. I wasn't sure what side of it you were on." She didn't argue with that. I respected her for it. We talked for another hour about her marriage, about what she was going to do, about the grandchildren and what they should and shouldn't be told. I didn't give her advice she didn't ask for. I listened. That was what she needed. Her husband moved out in February. I don't know the full details, and I haven't asked. What I know is that my daughter is still in their house with the children, that she has her own lawyer now, and that she called me last week to ask if she could bring the kids over on the weekend to help me put up the new fence in the backyard. I said yes. The morning they came, I watched from the same living room window where I'd watched them pull up at Thanksgiving. The older one had a pair of work gloves that were 3 sizes too big. The younger one was wearing his hockey helmet again. My daughter was carrying a bag with sandwiches in it. She looked up at the window and she waved, just like she had in November. But this time the wave was different. It wasn't the bright, performed warmth of someone who knows something you don't. It was smaller, quieter, real. I waved back and went to unlock the door. The house still knows every sound I make. The furnace, the stair, the tap. It knows when something is wrong and when something has come right again. That morning, coming through the front door, the kids tracking snow across the entryway, and my daughter hanging up her coat on the same hook she's used since she was 7 years old, the house felt the way it used to. Like it was breathing again. I still think about that Thanksgiving dinner sometimes. The turkey on the table, the grandchildren laughing, the wine my son-in-law poured for everyone but himself. All of it arranged so carefully, and underneath all of it, a plan. What I've come to understand is that the people who want to take from you rarely announce themselves. They arrive with casserole dishes and warm smiles. They call you Dad. They ask how you're feeling, with exactly the right amount of concern in their voice. The wrongdoing doesn't look like wrongdoing until you're standing far enough back to see the whole picture. By then, for a lot of people, it's already too late. I don't think my son-in-law saw himself as a villain. I think he saw an aging widower in a big house on valuable land, and he made a calculation. That's what greed does. It reframes other people into problems to be solved, assets to be managed, signatures to be obtained. It shrinks your moral imagination down to nothing. And the thing about that kind of thinking is that it leaves tracks. The land registry inquiries, the unreturned calls, the lawyer he'd already briefed before he'd ever asked me to sign anything. Weston saw the tracks before I did. That matters. I was not a clever man about this, because I am naturally clever. I was a careful man, because my wife taught me to be. Elaine used to say, "Know who holds the pen." She meant it about contracts, but she meant it about life, too. After she was gone, I kept that close. I called my own accountant. I found my own lawyer. I asked the questions before I needed the answers, not because I suspected anything specific at first, but because I understood that protecting the people and things you love requires active attention, not passive trust. That's the part I want to sit with for a moment, because I think a lot of people in my position, older, living alone, trusting by habit, wait until they feel something is wrong before they do anything, and the feeling usually comes too late. The strength I found in this wasn't courage in some dramatic sense. It was the quieter kind. The kind that gets up the morning after Thanksgiving and picks up the phone. The kind that keeps its voice even in a hallway conversation while something ugly is being proposed with a smile. My daughter called me in January and she was crying. She said she was sorry, and I believe she meant it. I also believe she knew more than she admitted to herself for longer than she admitted to herself. That's its own kind of reckoning, the one she has to live with, not me. What I know is that she chose differently when it mattered. She left. She brought the kids over to help with the fence. She hung her coat on the same hook she's used since she was 7. People can come back from the choices they make if they're honest about what those choices were. That's not sentiment. That's just what I've seen. The house is still standing. The deed still has my name on it. And on a Saturday in late March, with slush on the driveway and a grandson in an oversized hockey helmet, it felt exactly like what it has always been. Mine. And then, one day theirs, the right way.